Okay, hi everyone. This is really fun for me to do today. My book, Find Me in Florence, was begun when I was living in Florence. I was teaching screenwriting there for my university that I teach at. And I had about 12 screenwriting students over there with me. But I had some free time and I always wanted to write a novel. And I always tell my students, you got to write where you are right now. And so I thought, well, I should take my own advice. So I sat down and I was looking around Florence. I was at Cafe Jule, which is a wonderful place right in the one of the main piazzas. And I had just had a little tiff with my husband. And so I was like going, oh my God, why did I marry that man? This is crazy. So my book started from there. And so the very beginning of the book, which I'm not going to read because it's Stan, who's the husband of Lynn Bennett. He was supposed to come to Florence with her this year, and at the last minute, like 10 minutes before she leaves for the airport, he calls her from his law office and says that he can't get away. And so she has to go to Florence this year by herself, and they had gone together for the last 3 years. So I'm going to start a couple pages in, just 3 pages in, where Lynn is sitting at Cafe Jule all by herself. And so this is Find Me in Florence. I should also say that for those of you who have traveled to Florence, I think the book will bring back a lot of memories. And as you know, it's a beautiful city. If you've never been to Florence, I've been told that the book really brings it to life. And it is just a magical, historic, fabulous place to be, and very, very Italian. They work very hard to keep it very non-touristy, even though it's one of the most popular destinations. So here's Lynn Bennett sitting at Cafe Jule at near the beginning of the book. So here I am at the Cafe Jule in the heart of Florence, alone, ordering my morning cafe Americano. My mother's journal, the leather-bound pages that I climbed into the attic to retrieve after her funeral, is in my bag. Its weight is a reminder of my promise to myself. Follow her memories, rebuild her moments. She asked me, find me in Florence. The tuxedo-jacketed waiter delivers my cafe Americano in a beautiful silver pot along with the cornetto semplice on delicate china. Most people here call the cornetto semplice a croissant. They are shaped the same, but I know not to expect the French flaky, buttery crunch and lightness. The consistency of the Italian cornetto is closer to a brioche, doughier and yeastier, and most are topped with a slightly sticky orange-scented glaze, and some are filled with custard or Nutella or jam. Best to hold it with the paper napkin it's served on, or commit to sucking on fingers for the rest of the day. And I don't want to do that in Florence. It's a sophisticated city, not a walk around, suck on your sticky fingers city. Mi scusi, signorina, perdone. Startled, I looked up. The early sun obscures his face. He's tall. He holds a scarf in his hands, my scarf. Signorina, è suo? Is this yours? Yes, it's the inexpensive, bright red scarf I bought at a kiosk yesterday for €5 on a rare, it's my birthday, live a little, dare to shine whim. Oh, it must have slipped off my bag and fallen to the ground. I take the scarf. Grazie, grazie. He sits at another table. Un espresso, por favore, he says to the passing waiter, because no one tips in Italy, unless it's an extra special experience. Waiters rarely put forth any effort to please the customer. A person's lucky if service is attentive in any way. However, this waiter nods at this tall, dark-haired man in a white shirt and tie, and they exchange a friendly greeting. He might be a regular patron. Sport coat and dark jeans, polished leather shoes, a leather briefcase. There is so much leather in Florence, on people's backs, on their feet, in shops, in kiosks, some expensive and buttery soft, some rough and stiff and inexpensive. The city smells of leather. Across the piazza, street vendors push their carts into place, begin to set out their wares. I sigh, think of last year. Stan and I sat at this table. Stan ordered the American breakfast at Jule, eggs and toast. Italians use eggs to bind their frittatas, or they hard-boil them and slice them onto sandwiches. They don't torture and sear eggs and then pile them in a pale yellow mound on a plate for a morning meal. Stan laughed. It's my Nikes and the scrambled eggs. Screams USA. At least you don't wear a baseball hat, Bermuda shorts, and knee-high tube socks. Someone has to see you eating breakfast to get the first American hint. You hold these Italians up too high, Lynn. Things take too long to get done here. I appreciate that they know how beautiful the old is. In the last 2 years, Stan had carved out a week from his work schedule to visit me in Florence during the month-long Writers Now seminar. This visit will be different. An entire month witnessing Florence through my alone lens, not clouded by how Stan sees it. Cafe Gili is in the Piazza Carousel. That's not its real name. It's what I call it because with a multitude of piazzas around every corner, it's hard for a relative newbie to Florence to keep them straight. Its official name is the Piazza della Repubblica. I like to imagine the site as it once was, an old Roman forum with a temple dedicated to Mars, the city's patron god before Christianity was adopted. Then, in subsequent centuries, it was home to the Florence ghetto and a maze of shops called the Mercato Vecchio. Then it changed. It was gutted in a movement in the late 1800s called Risanamento. Risanamento in Italian means rehabilitation. Now, I view the high-end cafes, the hotels and shops that frame the square, the bustle of the well-heeled. I've taken tours with historians who put on sad, how could they have done such a thing, faces and claim that the risanamento of this historic piazza was not rehabilitation, but ruination, change. Unavoidable, perhaps. From here, it's a 5-minute walk to Florence's most famous bridge, the Ponte Vecchio, and a 5-minute walk in another direction to the Il Duomo di Firenze, the city's most famous cathedral. In the center of the Piazza della Repubblica is the beautiful antique carousel filled with brightly painted wooden horses. So it's easy to say, let's meet at the carousel. People know it. Its golden frame studded with sparkling, oversized faux gems, its gilded king's carriages, fresh flowers and pots, and the lilting accordion recordings of the Neapolitan ballads. If Paris is officially the city for lovers, Florence has to be a close second. I did read an article recently that named Las Vegas as a top city for lovers, and that made me wonder about the very notion of romance. I head towards the Ponte Vecchio and turn left and walk along the Arno, the river that runs through Florence. It's moving fast today, the result of a sudden rain last night. It's early, the start of the day, but lovers are already taking selfies, kissing and canoodling on the stone walls between water and the city. The mediocre violinist from last year and the year before, his instrument case open at his feet to attract tourist coins, plays the Godfather love theme. This is the only tune he seems to know. Professors, students, shop workers, dog walkers, businessmen, and women hurry to their destinations. A tour bus pulls up and a gaggle of Chinese tourists descend onto the street to march behind a guide waving a bright green flag through the air. I lift my bag onto the river wall, feel the shape of my mother's journal within it. I gaze at the Arno, think of the time my mother spent here 50 years ago. Her stories of how the Arno catastrophically flooded Florence in 1966. Priceless Roman and Renaissance artwork and irreplaceable ancient books and maps and prints and centuries-old letters housed in the city's museums and churches and libraries were in danger. One day, when she was helping me streak my dark curly hair with orange highlights from my junior high Halloween party, and we were waiting for the sprayed-on color to dry, she took a large book off the shelf in the hallway. We sat on the edge of the bathroom's tub and studied the map of the Tuscan region, and she explained how the La Penna and La Vene dams in Valderno, 34 miles away, ruptured during heavy rains and sent over 70,000 cubic feet of water per second towards Florence, traveling at almost 40 miles per hour. Think about it, Lynn, she said later as we drove across the Cross Island Parkway in Queens so she could drop me off at the party. Water was coming into the city as fast as we are driving right now. I was barely listening. I was worried that the orange streaks in my hair were too scary stupid for my Halloween party and that my dance moves would suck. She showed me the photographs she kept in a small wooden box in her closet, photos of herself as one of the mud angels, the angels of the mud, Gli Angeli del Fango. As the river rose and fell, volunteers arrived from around the world to wade through the detritus in attempts to rescue Florence's rich history. My mother was in the photographs, part of the Mud Angel rescue teams. This was before she married my father and settled in New York. At least 3 million books, Lynn, and probably more. And over 1,500 works of art, probably more, were damaged or destroyed in that flood. We wanted to save everything, but we couldn't. She sighed. So many lost treasures. After her first stroke, when I sat next to her on our comfy living room couch near the warmth of the fire my father had built in the fireplace, we thumbed through her picture books on the flood. She spoke slower and slurred a bit, forgot some words, but I could tell memories were dancing in her head. She told me how hospitals were evacuated and needed medicines were lost. We paged through to scrutinize Donatello's 1454 wooden statue of Magdalene Penitent. She was in the baptistry of the San Giovanni. This, she traced the concave lines of the emaciated body of Mary Magdalene, the long, pained, distraught, disturbing face in the photograph. She is starved, see? From living in the desert where she meditated, hating the world, hating herself, trying to forgive after the crucifixion of Christ. This statue of her was almost buried in muddy water, but she withstood. The water rose to her large hands. See, they're awfully big. See how they're pressed to her chest, always praying? My mother said it was sad because the flood could have been avoided. The Arno, Florence's lifeblood, had flooded to devastation levels before. The first one recorded was in the 12th century, and then again in the 13th and 16th centuries. We studied reproductions of Leonardo da Vinci's drawings. In the early 1500s, Lynn, he drew up these plans for river control, but no one paid attention. He wasn't popular with the rulers, the Medicis. Da Vinci was flamboyant, Lynn, and even though Florence was relatively open, seems there was a don't ask, don't tell sort of policy. Da Vinci may have flaunted too much. She sighed, told me how even Michelangelo, decades later, designed dams, but no projects were ever brought to fruition. Change did not happen. And so in 1966, Florence experienced great devastation. And now I'm here, 50 years after the fact, feeling the outline of her journal in my bag. It holds clues to stories she never told me, that I missed the telling of, photos she had never shared with me. I look down into the river, fight the wave of sadness mixed with guilt. I see myself sitting next to her in the hospital bed, her thin, dry, beautiful handwriting on the pad of paper we used to communicate. She wrote, honeymoon suitcase. Attic? Bring? I told her, of course I would. She continued her effort, find me in Florence. But I didn't get to the attic. I didn't bring the suitcase or those memories to her in time.